Hello, lads. It's Drake, and first I want to take a moment to pardon myself for my gap in uploading. I was very busy with work stuff at the school, and then I was also in the process of moving. And as it's become kind of a tradition, every time I move, I reorganize my bookshelves, and that gives me a good opportunity while my books are not on the floor to show off my organized shelves. So I will take that opportunity today to show you one of my planks, as it were, of one of my bookshelves. So as you can see, this is my Modernist shelf in English of books I wanted to highlight. I do have quite a few more that could go on a Modernist shelf in English, but I just kind of focus more on my favorites or ones that I wanted to keep nice, that sort of thing. And I think you'll see that here. So anyway, without further ado, we'll start on the left here. This is the Dover facsimile reprinting of the 1922 original Shakespeare and Company edition. Now, I have this one out because it's personally my favorite one to read. I prefer reading the original facsimile printing because that's the one that changed the world. That's kind of the way I like to think about it, and it is true. Although there is the revised edition or corrected edition that came out a handful of years later, 10, 15 years later. And then there's the Gabler edition. I really prefer the Gabler one the least, ironically, because I think you can see a couple books down. But anyway, also had to bring up the fact that this is the 100th anniversary of the printing, the centenary of Ulysses, and there's a lot of stuff going on. Unfortunately, I won't be able to make it to Dublin. It's looking like I was hoping to, but it's looking like I won't be able to. So let me know if there's anything going on in the US that would be fun to visit. Like, let's say New York, San Francisco. Maybe I'll just put something together in Austin. So anyway, yeah, let me know if there are any good Joyce celebrations this year. And then right next to it, I cleaned out all my critical literature for Joyce and for anyone else. I've never been a huge fan of literary criticism, and I think I might be at my lowest dip now as far as my respect for literary criticism, but I do still have a handful that I do enjoy. And the book As World by Marilyn French is the book that I keep for Ulysses. Continuing on here, again, I don't really like to have too much literary criticism, although for Ulysses I do have the annotated Ulysses. And then for Finnegan's Wake, I have this book, How Joyce Wrote Finnegan's Wake, and that one is excellent. It is a genetic history of Finnegan's Wake, and that's a pretty cool picture it has on the front. A chapter by chapter genetic guide. So, as you might know, Joyce took 20 years roughly to write Finnegan's Wake, and so it has an especially interesting genetic history. Then we have the restored Finnegan's Wake, which that's why I say it's ironic that I don't really like the Gabler, because for whatever reason, this restored Finnegan's Wake done by, I thought it was on the front. Let me see who it was done by. Danis Rose and John O'Hanlon, yeah. And then there's an appendix by Gabler and Greetham. This one's hard to come by, oddly enough. I don't know why they're not reprinting it. I think it has to do something with the hypertext or something, I don't know. But anyway, I do really enjoy reading that one. And it is a shame it's so difficult to get a hold of. I'm hoping now that it's the 100th anniversary of Ulysses, that over the next few years, 2039 will be the 100th for Finnegan's Wake. So maybe I'll have actually totally read straight through the damn thing by then. But anyway, even if not, that's fine. Next here, I have a copy of Finnegan's Wake, the original Faber text, incorporating Joyce's own corrections, but that's not the interesting thing about this. The interesting thing about this copy is that, if I can get it open, it came from Shakespeare and Company. Now, I didn't get it at Shakespeare and Company. I got it here in Austin, but someone got it from Shakespeare and Company, and that's kind of neat. This is one of the copies I like to read. I also like the feel of the Viking paperback, the one that is based on the original American edition. Finnegan's Wake is one of those books I would like to get one of the originals, though. It's I think it's a testament to human civilization that it exists. Then here, a skeleton key to Finnegan's Wake, of course by Joseph Campbell and Henry Morton Robinson. Now, the fascinating thing about this one is that it was printed during World War II. And because of that, if you guys weren't aware, they had to print it according to, you see here, a wartime book. This complete edition is produced in full compliance with the government regulations for conserving paper and other essential materials, printed in the United States of America. And it does feel quite thin, I will say. And I just think it's kind of interesting to have that history with it. The fact that Finnegan's Wake was published basically during World War II, like right when it started. And then this book was published several years later while World War II was currently happening. And, you know, there are a handful of writers that I think almost, and this is putting it a little too much, but they almost justify humanity's continued existence, along with, you know, some scientists and thinkers and just some, you know, let's say saintly people. You know, a couple here, Herman Broch and Robert Musil, who I don't have up on this shelf because I was been reading him lately. But Joyce is certainly one of them. And I think one kind of pithy way to think about Finnegan's Wake is that it is the supreme anti-fascist book, anti-fascist in the literal sense. And yeah, I want to keep going. I don't want to make this video too long. But then another thing here, the symposium on Finnegan's Wake. Our examination round his factification for incamination of work in progress. So that has, you know, Beckett's essay on it, and that's where he talks about the connection with Vico, and then a handful of other interesting essays. But these are really, and also the annotations to Finnegan's Wake, I have that one as well. I do like looking up the annotations, but so these three are the books that I would recommend out of all of them to have if you're interested in Finnegan's Wake and you want to kind of work it out, in my opinion, along with the annotations. The next here, the Maximus poems by Charles Olson. Now, I have to say, these, you know, late second half 20th century postmodern epic poems are not my favorite. I will include Ezra Pound's cantos in there. As a whole, they're not my favorite. There are some sections, though, that I think are masterpieces. In contrast, I would say, to something like The Wasteland or Hart Crane's The Bridge, I think these big postmodern epics don't hold up well themselves, you know, as a coherent unit. But if you imagine them just as like a collection of poems, there are some excellent, top-notch masterpiece poems in, you know, the two I mentioned at least, the Maximus poems, and then Ezra Pound's cantos, also Zhukovsky's A, which I don't have put up here, but I would put it along in that category. But anyway, I like picking up the Maximus poems and just reading through it sometimes. I also have his call me Ishmael. Then we have F. Scott Fitzgerald, his Trimalchio. If you've never heard of it, that's his last book he wrote that was suppressed because of the rampant sexual references in it. No, I'm just kidding. It's the draft of The Great Gatsby before it got edited. It's the early version of The Great Gatsby. And Trimalchio is a reference to Petronius Satyricon. And there are some fascinating differences between Trimalchio and The Great Gatsby. So basically, Trimalchio was, in so many words, too difficult, too elusive. So they changed the title, of course, to The Great Gatsby, and then they also did change some of the scenes, and they didn't really change the writing style so much. It's still Fitzgerald, but yeah, they definitely changed the feel of it. It felt more modernist before it got edited to what we know now today as The Great Gatsby. So anyway, look at that if you're interested in The Great Gatsby. I'm shocked how little this is talked about with the, almost unbelievable proliferation of The Great Gatsby and Fitzgerald's work. The next two, we have The Star Maker by Olaf Stapleton, which is one of the most fascinating sci-fi works. I don't really get into sci-fi too much. I think usually it's extremely poorly written. Dune being a prime example, unbelievably poor prose style, but Olaf Stapleton is actually manageable in that way. Excellent prose style, fascinating topics and scope of mind. And interesting fact, he is the first person to mention a Dyson sphere, or a power plant that basically uses the sun's energy to collect energy from, rather than solar panels or something. It actually surrounds the sun. Kind of fascinating. And then we have one of my three favorite American poets of the modernist era. So we have Hart Crane, who I think poem for poem is the strongest. Now, of course, he did also die quite young. Sorry, I'm kind of messing up on the showing of this stuff, but this is my edition of Hart Crane. I think I bought back in 2015 or so, and it's never too far from my side. I love Hart Crane so much. Just unbelievable that we have the fortune to be able to read his stuff. We have no right to be able to read his stuff. His stuff is much too good to have been published. And then we have E. Cummings, who for my money, and even without money, I would still put him between T.S. Eliot and Hart Crane. He wrote a lot, so it's kind of like Walt Whitman, where he wrote some absolutely top-tier masterpiece work, formally and thematically. But he has a lot of bad stuff too. But I would say if you take his best poems, you can justifiably put them up with the best poems of Hart Crane and the best poems of T.S. Eliot. I'll hold to it. And then we have this Johns Hopkins, Volume 1 of the Poems of T.S. Eliot. These are all his published poetry, and I think it has unpublished poetry too. Doesn't have the Book of Practical Cats, which frankly I'm fine with. Has excellent notes, has the publishing history of The Wasteland, which I think is really interesting. Speaking of, it's also the 100th anniversary of The Wasteland, so I'm planning on putting something up about that using my facsimile and transcript of the original, being He Do the Police in Different Voices, and also the final edited version edited by Pound and Eliot. So anyway, that video will be forthcoming. But if you like Eliot, I would recommend getting this edition of his poems. There's also Volume 2, but like I said, it's kind of his, children's poems and just kind of random stuff. This is the volume you want. Then next, we have Robert M. Coates. I was very pleased to see that this year they reprinted, might have been last year. Anyway, in the last 6 months or so, they reprinted The Eater of Darkness, which I don't have a new copy of. But Yesterday's Burdens, I think, is even better than The Eater of Darkness. The Eater of Darkness kind of is spicy and provocative, but Yesterday's Burdens, for my money, is, I quit using that phrase, will last longer. Next, we have Evelyn Scott, A Calendar of Sin. She is another author that will be rediscovered and will be heralded. Oh my gosh, I can't believe this author is not more widely known, blah, blah, blah. And I have read some of The Wave, but I've not finished it. And then the other work of hers that I think is fascinating, apart from A Calendar of Sin, is her migrations, which is, she titles them as arabesques. And then this, A Calendar of Sin, is like a 1,000-page, 2-volume, but it's explicitly one work. Just expansive, ironic drama of continuing through history to present day being the 1930s when this was put out. And interestingly enough, Evelyn Scott recommended Faulkner, because at the time she was more well known than Faulkner in the late 20s, early 30s, and she helped spread the word about Faulkner. So interesting connection there. Then we have a modernist poet I would put just ever so slightly below these three. Now, if you look at his whole span of his work, he's excellent, and he's certainly underappreciated for his quality and skill. He was friends with T.S. Eliot, Conrad Aiken, and I love this. I had another volume that got lost, got destroyed, and then I replaced it with this. Excellent, excellent. I highly recommend everyone to get the collected poems of Conrad Aiken. He also has novels, which are underappreciated. Then I have Juna Barnes, who is excellent for her prose style, neo-Baroque prose. Gotta love it. And this is the original version and related drafts of Nightwood, which I would recommend if you can get your hands on it from Dalkey Archive, because it was quite heavily edited when it was put out by New Directions. I think it was put out by New Directions. Yeah, it must have been. And then lastly, on this plank we have today, not quite on infinite plank level yet, but like I said, hopefully we'll get there someday. The Autobiography of Emmanuel Carnevale, who is an Italian poet, American poet, but came from Italy, lived in the US, knew Kay Boyle, as you can see, and very fascinating character. Check him out. There's a collection of his poems that you can find. I think I've talked about it several years ago on this channel, but came to the US when he was 15, established a literary career here, was not especially well known, but he got in with some of the modernists, and then he went back to Italy, wrote a couple books in Italian, and then just kind of disappeared. But this autobiography is fascinating. You won't read anything else like it. So anyway, this video went on longer than I expected, but modernism was one of my first loves with literature, so I have a lot to say, and that is my single shelf on my favorite and most interesting books of English language modernism. So not quite exhaustive, and just wanted to stay on one shelf, but let me know if you've read any of these. If you have any questions about them, I can talk more about these. And yeah, just thanks again for watching my videos. And then I will be having several videos, several recommendations put up on my Patreon this month, because I've been slacking. So keep an eye out for that. And also on this, on my regular channel, I'll be putting up several more videos. So thanks again, and death is a gang boss.